Thank you. I still remember that night vividly. It had started out so normally. We matched on Tinder and he seemed totally charming in our messages. His photos showed a clean-cut guy with a warm smile. When he asked me to dinner, I didn't think twice. I was excited to meet someone new. We chose a popular restaurant downtown and the conversation flowed easily once we sat down. He was well-spoken and polite, telling me about his job and asking about mine. I relaxed into my chair, thinking I may have actually found a real prospect on Tinder for once. About halfway through the meal, the conversation took an unsettling turn. He mentioned casually that he was carrying a concealed weapon on him. He said it so plainly, as if he was commenting on the weather. I froze momentarily, my wine glass halfway to my lips. Why would he bring that up like it was no big deal? However, I didn't want to overreact, so I nodded slowly and changed the subject. But he kept steering the conversation back to the concealed weapon. He started talking about how powerful and protected it made him feel to have it. His voice took on a new edge as he described the type of pistol he carried and how quickly he could draw it if needed. My stomach turned with each detail. When he started boasting about being ready for anything thanks to his gun, I set my fork down, my appetite vanishing. His entire body language had shifted, becoming tense and aggressive compared to his initial relaxed charm. He seemed to be intentionally emphasizing the weapon to intimidate me. I could practically see the concealed bulge under his jacket where the gun was hidden. My mind raced, unsure of how to handle this suddenly threatening situation with a virtual stranger. I glanced nervously around the crowded restaurant, but no one else seemed to notice the dark turn our date had taken. I debated pretending I needed to take an urgent call and getting out of there. But before I could act, he said, "Here, I'll show you," and started reaching inside his jacket. My breath caught in my throat. Was he really about to pull a gun in the middle of this restaurant just to scare me? His eyes glinted with a disturbing mix of pride and menace as his hand lingered under his jacket. "Please don't," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. "I believe you, but you're making me feel unsafe." I tried appealing to any semblance of decency he had. He paused, pursing his lips, then slowly withdrew his hand. But the damage was done. I could tell he was thrilled by my reaction, enjoying the power trip. I'd gone from viewing him as a promising date to prey in the clutches of a predator in the span of one meal. This charming facade hid a deeply unsettled man who felt empowered by intimidating and scaring women. I insisted on splitting the check despite his protests. As we left the restaurant, I made sure to walk ahead of him and said I needed to get home to take care of my cat. His polite act had returned, but I could tell it was merely a cover. He had revealed his true colors back in the restaurant. I kept my distance until I was able to quickly get into an Uber alone. The fear lingered even after I got home. I double-checked the locks on my doors and barely slept that night. My mind replayed those chilling moments when his facade first cracked and he wielded the idea of the concealed weapon like a subtle threat. How had I not sensed from the very first message that something was off? I never heard from him again, but it took a long time to feel safe going on dates after that night. I found myself constantly scanning for exits or possible threats when I was out with someone new. He had enjoyed that power over me, even if it was just for one night, but I refused to give anyone that kind of control again. In the weeks after, I recounted the story to several friends to help process the trauma of it all. They were shocked and offered their support. It helped to talk through it, though the experience haunted me. One girlfriend who worked as a counselor said it sounded like classic predatory behavior. He enjoyed normalizing the threat of violence and my fear. She encouraged me to seek therapy if I continued struggling with anxiety or triggers from that night. I decided to take a lengthy break from dating to focus on my own healing first. When I felt ready to try meeting someone again months later, I took extra precautions. I told a friend the name and location of any date beforehand so someone knew where I was. I avoided anyone who gave me even an inkling of bad vibes from their profile or our messages. It was impossible to prevent running into another predator, but I could do my best to stay safe. With time, the lingering trauma faded, though I remained warier in general. That evening was a harsh reminder that monsters can hide behind warm smiles and polite exteriors. But I refused to become jaded or terrified of dating. That would only give him more power over me. What happened was not my fault, no matter how many times I second-guessed the warning signs. I'm thankful I trusted my gut in that restaurant and got out of there unharmed. And I am proud of how far I've come since. I was so excited when I matched with Trevor on Tinder. His profile made him seem adventurous and spontaneous, yet grounded at the same time. We exchanged messages for a couple weeks before deciding to meet up for dinner. The conversation flowed easily as we got to know each other. Trevor told me about his job as a nurse and his passion for extreme sports like skydiving, cave diving, and base jumping. At first I was impressed. It takes guts to do those things. But as the night went on, his stories started to make me uncomfortable. Trevor described pushing the limits of safety during his adventures, purposely putting himself in harm's way for the thrill of it. He talked about the dangers so casually, like he didn't care at all about his own well-being. When he told me about the time he removed his parachute mid-jump, I got chills. As he moved on to describing his experiences with hard drugs, I started to feel afraid. Trevor talked about trying any substance he could get his hands on, seeking more intense highs and stronger rushes. He described risky combinations and experimental doses that could easily lead to overdoses or psychotic breaks. It was clear Trevor had little regard for consequences. He saw his brushes with death as badges of honor. I tried to gently suggest he should be more careful, but he brushed it off, insisting I was overreacting. In his view, the thrill was worth any risk. By the end of dinner, I realized I made a big mistake in going out with Trevor. Under his charming, spontaneous exterior was someone incredibly reckless and dangerous, who knew what illegal or unethical things he was capable of when seeking his next adrenaline rush. I made an excuse to cut the date short, claiming I wasn't feeling well. Trevor seemed oblivious to my discomfort as we said an awkward goodbye outside the restaurant. I breathed a sigh of relief when I got in my car and locked the doors. On the drive home, I berated myself for not seeing the red flags sooner. Why did I ignore my gut instinct telling me to avoid men who seek out life-threatening thrills? Trevor clearly had a serious addiction to danger, and I never wanted to see him again. As soon as I got home, I blocked Trevor's number. To my dismay, he started messaging me from different numbers, upset I was ignoring him. His tone quickly turned angry and threatening. I asked him to leave me alone. I was terrified, worried he would show up at my apartment or workplace if I didn't reply. After a sleepless night, I took the morning off work to go to the police station. I showed the officers the threatening messages and asked what I could do to protect myself. They offered to speak with Trevor and tell him to cease contact with me. I spent the next few weeks constantly looking over my shoulder, worried I'd run into Trevor around town. My friends could tell I was on edge and kept assuring me I'd done the right thing. Over time, the police intervention seemed to work, and Trevor finally left me alone. I'm thankful I got out of that situation relatively unscathed, but it taught me an important lesson. I need to follow my instincts and be more cautious when meeting men from dating apps. There are dangerous people out there who can initially come across as charming. From now on, I'll make sure to have a few low-key public dates before trusting someone new. And any signs of addictive or thrill-seeking behavior are an instant deal-breaker. My safety is too important to ignore red flags. I'm just glad I escaped before Trevor pulled me into his dangerous world. The experience with Trevor left me shaken and wary of online dating. For a while, I deleted all my dating apps, too afraid of matching with someone like him again. But after a few months, my friends convinced me I couldn't let one bad encounter keep me from putting myself out there. So I re-downloaded Tinder, this time with a new sense of caution. I made sure to have a phone or video call with any potential dates before agreeing to meet them. That small screening made me feel more secure when I did start going on in-person dates again. I also told a friend whenever I was meeting someone new, checking in with them during and after the date. These precautions gave me more confidence in my ability to stay safe while getting to know men through Tinder. With each good date, my faith was slowly restored that there were kind, stable guys worth meeting out there. It took time, but I eventually matched with Nathan, who couldn't have been more different than Trevor. Our first few dates were in public places and focused on conversation, not adrenaline rushes. I never felt pressured or unsafe with Nathan. He was always considerate of my boundaries and focused on getting to know me, not seeking thrills. Now, over a year later, Nathan and I are happily dating. I'm so grateful I didn't give up on finding love after my horrifying date with Trevor. I should have known better. When she suggested coming over to my place for our first date, a tiny part of me felt uneasy, but the rest of me was too eager to meet someone new. After matching on Tinder and chatting for a few days, we decided to take things offline and meet up in person. I cleaned my apartment, stocked up on a few bottles of wine, and waited anxiously for her arrival. When the doorbell rang, I felt a rush of excitement mixed with a twinge of nervousness. with the door to a beautiful woman, her warm smile and friendly demeanor putting me at ease almost instantly. We started talking and the conversation flowed easily. A couple of glasses of wine in, she excused herself to use the bathroom. I didn't think anything of it at the time, happily refilling my own glass and waiting for her return. But when several minutes passed and she still hadn't come back, I began to feel a nagging sense of unease. I got up and walked towards the bathroom, calling out her name. No response. I pushed the door open to find the room empty. My heart started to race as I quickly made my way back to the living room, only to discover that my wallet was missing from the coffee table, along with my car keys and a few other valuables. Panic set in as the realization hit me. I'd been scammed. This woman had expertly lured me into inviting her over, all the while planning to steal from me. I frantically searched the apartment, but she was long gone, leaving me feeling violated in my own home. Later, I did some research and discovered that this wasn't the first time she had pulled a stunt like this. Apparently, she had a history of targeting men on dating apps, using her charm and good looks to gain their trust, only to rob them blind. I couldn't believe I had fallen for it so easily. The whole experience left me feeling shaken and distrustful. It's hard to believe that someone could be so calculated and heartless, to use the promise of a romantic connection as a means to take advantage of someone. I can't help but wonder how many other unsuspecting men have fallen victim to her schemes. In the aftermath, I felt a mix of emotions: anger, embarrassment, and a deep sense of violation. Not only had she stolen my possessions, but she had also taken away my sense of safety and trust in the dating world. It's a sobering reminder that even in the age of online dating, we need to be vigilant and cautious when meeting someone new. As I move forward, I know I'll be more cautious in my approach to dating. I'll be sure to meet in public places for the first few encounters, and I'll be more aware of any red flags or suspicious behavior. But part of me can't help but feel that the damage has already been done. The trust I once had in the process of meeting someone new has been shattered, and it's going to take time and effort to rebuild it. I keep replaying the night over and over in my head, wondering if there were any signs I missed. She seemed so genuine, so interested in getting to know me better. I guess that was all part of the act. I can't believe I didn't pick up on any red flags, but she was just so disarming. Her flirtatious laugh, her witty banter, the way she touched my arm lightly when she made a joke, it all seemed to signal interest and attraction. I was too caught up in the fantasy of a budding connection to second guess it. The worst part is the sense of violation I now feel in my own home. This was my personal space, my safe haven, and now it feels tainted. Knowing she snooped through my bedroom, my closets, touching my belongings with deceitful hands, it makes my skin crawl. I find myself sanitizing things she may have touched, irrationally worried that her malevolent energy has lingered. It's also made me realize just how unsafe online dating can really be. We view profiles, swipe left or right, and make judgments about people based on a few photos and some text. But how well do any of us really know the strangers we invite into our lives? I thought I was being smart, meeting in a public place first, talking on the phone, taking those small precautions. But it wasn't enough, not when faced with someone determined to take advantage. I'm faced with the fact that I may never see her again, never get any closure or justice. The police said there's little they can do without more evidence. I'm left feeling powerless, like I'll forever be looking over my shoulder, wary of strangers and doubtful of new connections. My friends have tried to be supportive, telling me I couldn't have known what would happen, that I can't blame myself. Rationally, I know they're right, but that doesn't make it easier. I'm left with a painful reminder that there are dishonest, manipulative people out there more than willing to cause harm for their own gain. So where does this leave me? Wary and unlikely to trust easily again when it comes to online dating, but also determined not to become cynical or isolate myself out of fear. What happened shook me to my core, but I refused to let one deceptive person destroy my faith in humanity altogether. When she matched with me on Tinder and suggested we meet up in the park, a part of me felt uneasy, but I ignored that instinct. I was just looking for a casual date, nothing serious. How could I have anticipated the nightmare that was about to unfold? I arrived at the park nervous but excited. I scanned the area, searching for my date. That's when I saw them, a group of 4 men all staring straight at me. They started walking in my direction, and a chill ran down my spine. Something wasn't right. As they approached, I knew I was in trouble. They surrounded me, their expressions menacing. I tried to back away, but they blocked my path. One of them, the tallest of the group, stepped forward. "You're the one who was supposed to meet our girl, right?" he said, his voice dripping with malice. I stammered, my heart racing. "I don't know what you're talking about. I was just meeting someone for a date." The man let out a cold laugh. "That's what they all say." He took a step closer, and I could see the gleam of a knife in his hand. I frantically looked around, hoping someone would come to my aid, but the park was empty. I was completely alone at the mercy of these thugs. As they started to close in on me, I realized with sinking dread that this had all been a setup. The woman I had matched with on Tinder was working with these men, using the app to lure unsuspecting victims into a trap. I had fallen for it, hook, line, and sinker. It demanded my wallet, my phone, and anything else of value. I had no choice but to hand it all over, trembling with fear. The thought of being beaten or worse sent a wave of panic through me. As they rifled through my belongings, I desperately tried to come up with a way to escape, but they were too quick, too coordinated. I was completely at their mercy. Then one of the men grabbed me roughly by the collar. "You know, we don't take kindly to people like you coming around here, trying to hook up with our girls," he snarled. "Maybe we need to teach you a lesson." I felt sick to my stomach, knowing that I might not make it out of this alive. I squeezed my eyes shut, bracing for the worst. But just then, a voice rang out from behind the group. "Hey, what's going on over here?" The men whirled around, caught off guard. A security guard was approaching, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Nothing to see here, officer," one of the men said, trying to sound casual. "We were just having a friendly chat." The security guard didn't seem convinced. "Well, it looks like you're harassing this guy. I'm going to have to ask you to move along." The men exchanged uneasy glances, realizing that their plan had been foiled. Reluctantly, they backed away, muttering under their breath. I stood there, shaking as the security guard approached me. "You all right, son?" he asked, his expression concerned. I nodded, my voice trembling. "Why, yes, I'm fine. Thank you for your help." The security guard gave me a sympathetic look. "You're lucky I happened to be nearby. This park can be dangerous, especially at night." He paused, seeming to consider something. "In fact, why don't I walk you to your car, just to be safe?" I readily agreed, not wanting to be alone if those men came back. We walked in silence through the dark park. I kept glancing around nervously, worried they might jump out from the shadows. When we reached my car, I turned to the security guard. "I can't thank you enough. You really saved me back there." He gave a humble shrug. "Just doing my job. But do yourself a favor. Be more careful about who you meet from those dating apps. You never know who's really on the other end." I knew he was right. My desperation for a date had clouded my judgment. From now on, I'd make sure to properly vet anyone I met online. This was a wake-up call. As I drove home, my hands still shaking, I kept replaying the whole incident in my mind. I couldn't believe how easily I had been duped by the woman on Tinder. She had seemed so charming, so normal in our messages. Just thinking about it made me feel sick with anger and embarrassment. When I got home, I immediately deleted my Tinder account. No more online dating for me. It was too risky, too unpredictable. I could have been killed tonight over my foolishness. In the coming days, I found myself growing paranoid, constantly looking over my shoulder. Every stranger I passed on the street felt like a potential threat. It really rattled me how defenseless I had been against those men. My friends tried to be sympathetic, but I could tell they secretly thought I had been dumb. And maybe I had been. I should have listened to that inner voice telling me something was off. But the need for companionship had blinded me. I had just gotten out of a long-term relationship and decided I was ready to start dating again. My friend convinced me to download Tinder, saying it was a great way to meet new people. After setting up my profile, I started swiping. Most guys seemed pretty normal, average looking with generic photos and bios, but one profile caught my eye. His name was Matt. His pictures showed him wearing expensive suits and drinking wine on a yacht. His bio said he was a successful businessman in his early 30s who enjoyed the finer things in life. He seemed sophisticated and exciting compared to the other profiles I'd seen. I swiped right immediately. We matched right away, and he asked me out to dinner that weekend. I was thrilled that such a seemingly impressive guy was interested in me. We met at a five-star restaurant downtown. He was just as handsome in person as he looked online. When we sat down, Matt ordered a $200 bottle of wine without even looking at the menu. He insisted we get the chef's tasting menu too. Only the best for us tonight. he said with a wink. Throughout dinner, he name-dropped celebrities he claimed to know and bragged about extravagant vacations he took to the south of France, St. Tropez, and Dubai. I have to admit, at first I was flattered by the flashy lifestyle he described. But as the night went on, I started to feel uncomfortable. His constant boasting seemed designed to impress me rather than get to know me. Whenever I tried to change the subject to talk about my interests, he steered the conversation back to himself. At one point, he leaned in close and said, "You're even more beautiful in your photos." With the right opportunities, a pretty young thing like you could go far. I shifted awkwardly in my seat, unsure how to respond. As dinner progressed, his comments got increasingly inappropriate. He would leer at me and make suggestive remarks about my appearance, like, "With curves like that, you should be modeling." At one point, he brazenly suggested he could help me get plastic surgery if I wanted to enhance any part of my body. I was completely creeped out. When he went to the restroom, I even considered making a discreet exit from the restaurant. But I didn't want to cause a scene, so I decided to stick it out for the rest of dinner, hoping he would tone it down. Of course, he did not. Over dessert, he started talking about his business, which he described as introducing beautiful young women to successful men who wanted company. He said he loved recruiting fresh faces and helping them get ahead in life. Then he gave me a long look up and down and said, "I think you'd be perfect for it. The clients would love you. You could make a small fortune." I was horrified as I realized he was basically offering to pimp me out to rich men. I abruptly stood up and said I had to use the restroom. Of course, I sneaked out the back door instead. I spent the entire Uber ride home feeling shaky and nauseated. I couldn't believe I had almost fallen for Matt's glamorous facade. Underneath, it was a sleazy, manipulative creep who saw me as an object to exploit rather than a person. The experience taught me an important lesson. Don't take people at face value, especially on dating apps. I'm now much more cautious when meeting someone new. I look for red flags and keep my guard up until I really get to know them. Weeding out guys like Matt will be crucial to staying safe. I'm so thankful I trusted my instincts over his superficial charm. Matt seemed exciting and successful at first, but turned out to be a dangerous, toxic person. I'm lucky I got away unscathed, but the encounter left me feeling unsettled for weeks after. I keep imagining what could have happened if I had let my guard down and fallen for his manipulations. Overall, the posh restaurants and luxury lifestyle were just tools Matt used to try to trap me in his twisted scheme. I'm now wary of flashy displays of wealth. More often than not, they mask something sinister. I'm sticking to down-to-earth guys who care about who I am as a person. This frightening experience taught me to value genuine emotional connection over any amount of money or extravagance. I hope sharing my story helps other women feel empowered to spot and avoid predators like him. When I finally got home that night, I immediately deleted my Tinder profile. I was too shaken up to keep trying online dating after what had happened. My friend tried to convince me I just had bad luck and should give it another shot, but I refused. The idea of swiping through more strangers and putting myself at risk of meeting another Matt was too much for me to handle. For weeks after, I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder when walking alone at night. If I noticed a flashy sports car rolling by or saw a man in an expensive suit, I felt my heart race and my palms sweat. Even harmless things like waiters offering wine selections put me on edge. They reminded me too much of that disastrous dinner. I started avoiding any place or situation where I might encounter someone like Matt again. I turned down party invitations from wealthy acquaintances because the thought of mingling among crowds full of wealthy businessmen terrified me. When my company hosted networking events, I made excuses to get out of attending. Fancy restaurants, hotel bars, even certain high-end stores, I steered clear of anywhere that might attract rich men looking for arm candy. While my caution has faded a bit over time, I'm still more wary than I used to be. I no longer take displays of wealth and success at face value. Underneath the glossy surface could lurk someone dangerous and manipulative. I still get chills when I think back to my date with Dom. We had matched on Tinder a couple weeks earlier and he seemed nice enough at first. His profile said he was new to town and looking to meet people. I was relatively new to online dating, so I didn't look too closely for red flags beyond the basics like employment, shared interests, etc. We exchanged some friendly messages over the app and agreed to meet up for dinner at a trendy new restaurant downtown. When we met outside the restaurant, he looked just like his photos: average height, athletic build, stylish haircut. He greeted me with a warm smile and polite handshake. As we sat down at our table, he complimented my outfit, a black dress and jean jacket, and asked thoughtful questions to get the conversation going. So far, so good. Over appetizers of bruschetta, Dom asked about my job as a marketing assistant and my family back home. When I mentioned having two younger sisters who I was close with, he nodded and said solemnly, "Family can be tough." My older brother and I haven't spoken in years after he really betrayed me. He trailing off, not elaborating on what happened. I found it odd that he hinted at family drama so early, but chalked it up to us not knowing each other well yet. As the date continued over pasta entrees, Dom revealed more unusual stories from his past relationships. He talked about an ex-girlfriend he dated for over a year who he said took advantage of his generosity. When they broke up, he cut off her access to his bank accounts and credit cards. She ended up losing her expensive apartment that he had been paying for. Another woman apparently spread nasty rumors about him at the office after a bad breakup, so he decided to report her to their manager for ethics violations, nearly getting her fired. The way he told these stories was very matter of fact, like the women deserved what happened to them. I shifted uncomfortably in my seat, starting to feel uneasy. Dom seemed almost proud as he recounted how he had enacted calculated revenge against people who he felt had done him wrong. He described it as teaching them a lesson so they wouldn't hurt anyone else like they had hurt him. His charming smile remained fixed throughout the unsettling stories. When Dom went to the restroom, I quickly texted my roommate Jen under the table. "Date is super weird. Please call it a fake emergency so I can get out of here." Jenna had devised a story about her car breaking down, so I had an excuse to abruptly end the date. Dom seemed disappointed when I cut the dinner short after rushing through dessert, but he maintained his polite composure, insisting on walking me to my car a block away. When we reached my car, he said we should definitely go out again soon because he didn't want this to be our only memory together. I tried to be polite while making a quick exit. Driving home, I felt relieved to be away from Dom. Something about the night had felt off in a way I couldn't quite articulate at first. Jenna could tell from my expression that the date had gone badly and gave me a hug when I walked in the door. Over the next few days, I thought back on the conversations during dinner. The more I reflected, the more sinister Dom's stories seemed in hindsight. He clearly harbored an unsettling bitterness toward the women he blamed for wronging him in past relationships. The fact that he would methodically mess their lives afterwards was very disturbing. I decided not to respond to Dom's follow-up texts, asking about another date. But he persisted, sending messages like, "Hoping to see your pretty smile again soon," and "Don't be a stranger." After a couple weeks, I finally just blocked his number. About a month later, I heard through acquaintances that Dom had been showing up at his latest ex-girlfriend's apartment late at night and slashing her car tires repeatedly. He also apparently sent her anonymous spiteful gifts and singing telegrams to embarrass her at the office. Hearing this made me realize that if I had ignorantly continued dating him and it ended badly, I could have become a target of his unhinged vengeance too. That scary date with Dom taught me to follow my instincts much more closely when getting to know someone. Now, I watch very carefully for red flags in a new date's comments or behaviors, not just major warning signs, but subtle hints that seem off. If a guy says or does something on a first date that gives me pause or rings false, even briefly, I make a mental note. One odd reaction could just be awkwardness, but a pattern of them likely signals deeper issues I should be cautious of. I'm also more assertive now about exiting an uncomfortable or bad situation, rather than feeling obligated to be polite or give someone the benefit of the doubt when I'm getting weird vibes. Trusting those gut feelings and intuition may have saved me from becoming fixated on and tormented by Dom's lingering bitterness. It still pains me to think about the possibility that someone else may have later met Dom for a first date and ignored those initial gut reactions like I did at first. I still believe most people are kind of at heart when you first get to know them. But because of Dom, I've learned to identify individuals who seem superficially charming at first, but in reality harbor unsettling anger or potential for cruelty below the surface. I still remember the excitement I felt when I first matched with her on Tinder. Davina's profile picture showed a pretty girl with a warm smile that drew me in. She came across as sweet and down to earth in our initial messages, telling me about working as a teacher and her love of hiking. I was thrilled when she agreed to meet up for dinner. When we met in person, I found Davina just as charming as her online persona. Over dinner, she opened up about her difficult childhood. She told me heartbreaking stories about her absentee father and alcoholic mother. I felt protective towards her as she recounted tales of loneliness and neglect. My heart went out to this vulnerable woman who had endured so much pain. We started dating and grew closer over the next few weeks. The more Davina revealed about her past, the more I wanted to comfort and take care of her. She was intelligent, funny, and so easy to talk to. I couldn't believe my luck in finding someone so special on a dating app. But then small inconsistencies in Davina's stories started bothering me. Key details changed or were contradicted when she told me about past events. When I asked for clarification, she'd get defensive and accuse me of calling her a liar. I tried to be understanding, knowing she'd been through trauma. However, the conflicting details kept mounting. Her descriptions of family members and childhood homes didn't add up. The timeline of events she provided just didn't make sense. I finally confronted Davina, gently pointing out that some things she'd told me contradicted each other. Instead of explaining, Davina flew into a rage. She lashed out at me, saying I was just like everyone else who would have abandoned her. How could I betray her trust by questioning the veracity of her painful memories? I was left stunned, feeling guilty for upsetting her, but also unsettled by her dramatic reaction. Over the following weeks, I realized Davina had been playing me all along. The stories about her terrible childhood were a ploy to gain my sympathy and attention. She weaponized the guilt and protectiveness she elicited, using it to keep me under her spell. Whenever I tried to create some distance, Davina would have an emotional crisis or trauma to share, drawing me back in. She kept me on the hook by alternating between vulnerability and volatility. I was constantly walking on eggshells, afraid to set her off. I felt manipulated, but also responsible for her fragile emotional state. Ultimately, I had to end the relationship for my own well-being. Davina tried to make me feel heartless, saying I was abandoning her like everyone else. I almost caved in, but realized no healthy relationship could be built on false pretenses and emotional blackmail. Cutting ties with Davina was one of the hardest things I've had to do. I was left feeling hollow, doubting myself and my judgment. How could I have misread someone so completely? It was a painful lesson in listening to my gut. When something feels off, it's for good reason. Davina also had a way of subtly putting me down even as she appeared supportive. She'd make backhanded compliments about my clothes or taste in music. If I talked about past relationships, she'd imply I had bad judgment or something was wrong with those women. Slowly, she undermined my self-esteem while boosting her own position. With the benefit of hindsight, I can see other red flags that should have given me pause. Davina seemed to have no close friends and was estranged from her family, something she blamed on their cruelty towards her. But it made me wonder why she was so isolated. Healthy people tend to have connections to others in their lives. She also latched onto me immediately with intense focus, wanting to be together all the time. At first I was flattered, thinking it meant she really liked me. But in retrospect, it was a sign of neediness and poor boundaries from the start. Davina had a habit of flattering me effusively, almost putting me on a pedestal. Then she'd react intensely if I ever expressed an opinion she didn't agree with, even over small things. She once got upset and accused me of being just like the rest because I said I preferred dogs over cats. Her over-the-top reactions were out of proportion to the situation. Over time, Davina increasingly tried to isolate me from friends and family. She would make passive-aggressive comments if I wanted to spend time with anyone else. She'd also manufacture crises around occasions when I had plans apart from her. It was a gradual process, but eventually I realized how cut off I had become due to her manipulation. When I matched with Claire on Tinder, I thought she seemed really chill and easygoing. We exchanged some messages and decided to meet up for drinks. The conversation flowed easily and we had a lot in common, so we made plans to go out again. On our third date, we were grabbing dinner at a nice restaurant downtown. I was really starting to like Claire. She was funny, smart, and we just clicked. About halfway through the meal, I noticed a woman approaching our table who looked vaguely familiar. As she got closer, I realized it was Claire's friend Jen that I had met once before at a party. Jen pulled up a chair and joined us without even asking. She started chatting with Claire like I wasn't even there, bringing up people and inside jokes I didn't understand. It was a little awkward, but I tried to be polite while the two of them caught up. After a few minutes, Jen turned her attention to me. She started asking pointed questions about what I did for work and where I grew up. Standard stuff, but with an edge to her tone. I gave brief answers, unsure where this was going. That's when Jen made a sly comment directed at Claire about me being just her type. I wasn't sure what she meant by that, but Claire shifted uncomfortably and told Jen she should get going and let us enjoy our date. Jen didn't take the hint. If anything, she doubled down, dropping hints about Claire's history with men. She'd say things like, "Oh, is he the one you're going to ghost after 3 dates for no reason? Or are you going to string this one along for a while until you get bored?" I was mortified. Claire and I had only been on a few dates and hadn't defined anything yet. This felt like a totally inappropriate conversation for Jen to insert herself into unprompted. Claire kept shooting me apologetic looks, clearly also wanting Jen to leave, but Jen kept monopolizing the conversation, oversharing details about Claire's past relationships and dating habits. I felt like I was trapped at the table, unable to excuse myself without making things more awkward. When Jen went to the bathroom, I asked Claire if everything was okay. She seemed embarrassed, saying Jen was just being protective after some bad experiences Claire had been through. I told Claire I understood, but Jen was making me feel really uncomfortable. Just then, Jen returned, and I hoped that would be the end of it. But she continued her passive-aggressive barbs, acting territorial and trying to embarrass Claire. I'd noticed other tables starting to glance over, intrigued by the subtle drama unfolding. I suggested to Claire that maybe we should go, but Jen insisted on coming along to whatever bar we were heading to next. At that point, I was so put off by her invasive behavior that I said I was tired and making an early night of it. Claire shot me an apologetic look and said she'd text me soon. As I left, I heard Jen making more snide remarks, painting me as a bad guy for ending the date early. The whole experience left me feeling manipulated. I could tell Claire was mortified by Jen's antics, but at the same time, she didn't seem willing to stand up to her so-called friend. I wondered if Jen acted this way because she was jealous or just extremely overprotective. Regardless, I didn't like feeling caught between the two of them or being used as a pawn in whatever issues they clearly had between them. Jen's territorial behavior was a huge red flag, and her ambushing our date was completely inappropriate. I decided that as much as I liked Claire, this drama wasn't worth pursuing. Even if she was apologetic afterwards, she hadn't shown the confidence to tell Jen to back off in the moment. I needed to trust that any partner I was with would have my back if their friend disrespected our relationship like that. In the end, I texted Claire saying I didn't think we were a fit and wished her the best. She seemed understanding, admitting her friendship with Jen had gotten unhealthy. I hope they find a way to set some boundaries, but I knew I needed to remove myself from the situation entirely. In a weird way, ungrateful things with Claire ended quickly before I got in any deeper. It was definitely a night I'll never forget, and a hard lesson on the importance of choosing both your partner and your friends wisely when looking for meaningful connections. In the following weeks, I tried to put the bizarre incident behind me and get back out there meeting new people. I went on a few more Tinder dates, but found myself hesitating to really open up or get invested, worried about ending up in a similar situation. My friends noticed I was a bit more guarded and encouraged me not to let one bad experience make me cynical or mistrustful. I knew they were right, but I just needed a bit more time before I felt comfortable putting myself out there again. Thanks for listening in. If you like these stories and want to hear more, then please subscribe and like and support this new channel. We have more stories for you to listen to.